Well, hey everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights Live Show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John.
Hello.
All right, nicely done. This week, we are talking about how to get started with generative AI lead scoring. Now, using generative AI for sales processes is a super hot topic. Everyone's trying to figure out what to do, how to use it, when to use it. But before we get into that, John, can you tell us a little bit about lead scoring in general? Like, forget AI for a second. What is lead scoring? How do people use it? Why do people ignore it? Like, just tell us everything, because you are our resident sales guru.
I have been, wrapped up in this many a time and seen it go wildly awry and cause trouble and fighting. Basically, the idea is you're prioritizing leads. And when you get down to it, that's just all it is, right? You're sorting out, you've got all these names coming in and you need to figure out like which ones are worth talking to, which ones are crazy and are just going to waste our time. And, can we identify past customers so that they know that they already know us? All these kinds of questions. Lead scoring is the Swiss Army knife that fixes a bunch of this stuff. And so having a system set up, and just before we jumped on, I kind of jumped on my soapbox already of a big part of it is people think that it's demographic info, that's the best source of, lead scoring is that, okay, oh, you're a Fortune 500. Okay. Add 2,000 points to your lead score. And, you're in Florida. Oh, that's it. Add another 500 points. But what we've seen proven out over time is really the big thing is if you're able to track behavioral traits. So it doesn't matter what company this person is at, have they downloaded 3 white papers in the past week and have they attended webinars and are they on the pricing page? That kind of stuff is great to kind of trigger the alarms that this is somebody that needs to get talked to right away or is getting ready to buy something. At the other end of it, the one thing to keep in mind is really all this stuff is only of use if you're at a point where you can't handle the incoming volume. If you're able to get the inbound leads and somebody is able to put eyes on them and figure out, what's going on here, you don't have to spend $50,000 in 2 quarters building. Of course, Chris is going to show us how to get this done in 4 hours now. And so maybe that will change everything that, you will want to build these as soon as possible to get there. But this is the kind of thing where if you've got 10 sales guys in a bullpen and your goal is to avoid the fights over the leads, because guys like that will fist fight over a lead and you don't want to be involved with that. So having a lead scoring system and to be able to do the round robin is another thing. That's a really popular thing in large orgs where it hits a lead score and then who does it actually go to? You actually can target and set up whether you want to make it fair or you want to make sure that the winners only get the good stuff. Or the people
These are the Glengarry leads.
Yeah, totally. The people you hate get the bad leads, for a couple of months to prove that they're good or whatever. All those kinds of, that's where you get the sadistic sales masters pulling the levers and controlling where stuff goes. But yeah, that's my kind of like, okay, stump speech on lead scoring and why you need to do it.
All right. And a quick review. Contacts, prospects, leads. Can you just give us a quick overview of the difference? Because I think a lot of companies say, oh, well, they entered our system. It's a lead.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and this is, there are at least now, there's kind of some standards, like a lot of CRM systems have leads as a lower tier. They haven't engaged with sales yet. That's kind of the dividing line. And then contacts are records that have had some kind of direct interaction with sales. And depending on the CRM system, a lot of times, in some systems, contacts can be rolled up to organizations. So you can pull an org and see all the contacts. Some systems do the same thing with leads, where the leads get bundled with the companies. And usually that's good because you want to see, okay, who are the ones we're doing business with and who are the prospects that we want to jump on board with. But other systems and other sales structures won't add the leads to an organization because they feel that's actually polluting the data. Because if you're selling something where there's 2,700 locations for the company, you don't want the stockroom person from Peoria, Illinois, to be in the company record for the home office of Pepsi or whatever. And so there's dividing lines there. So yeah, there's all kinds of different lines. But in general, you usually have suspects or prospects. So there you're trying to figure out just who they are. You've got leads that are being worked somehow, whether it's by automation or being passed to a salesperson. And then contacts are actually part of records of companies that you know are real. And at the top of the mountain are customer records. They're usually contacts, but tagged as a customer. And those are people have money. So that's the best of the best.
I feel like I could ask you questions all day long, so perhaps that's for another episode. Today, we need to get into the generative AI lead scoring. So, Chris, now that we have an overview of lead scoring and leads, where should we start?
Well, John hit on something really important, which is any AI system is only as good as the data going into it. So if your CRM or your marketing automation system is a hot mess, AI ain't going to help you, right? This is, as Katie often says, new technology does not solve old problems, and data governance and data cleanliness in your CRM is the oldest of the old problems.
Well, and quick plug for that, on June 5th, I am doing a webinar for the Marketing AI Institute, the AI for B2B Marketers Summit, on using AI, very simple process for scoring the data quality of your data set and recommendations on how to fix it. So that's just a quick plug. Go see them and sign up for the webinar. I don't think you'll regret it.
So you've got to have good data to start with. If you don't, none of this is going to work. And so that would be the step number one. Step number two is to figure out what data you have to work with, because it goes back to, if you have no idea what's in your database, you're going to have a bad time. And so that's going to be, if you want to use stuff with generative AI in a programmatic way, you first have to look at your data and just see what is even available. So for today's examples, we're going to use synthetic data because, for obvious reasons, we can't put personally identifying information of real people on a public live stream. That would just be, there'd be all sorts of things wrong with that. And so this is all synthetic CRM data. This is from, in fact, if you want to use this for your own work, the Trust Insights GitHub repository, if you go to github.com/trustinsights, there's a synthetic CRM generator that generates a file just like this, if you are fluent in the R programming language, and it will make you as many fake CRM records as possible, which is a great thing to do to practice. And so we have your standard stuff in here. We have first name, last name, gender, title, company name, annual revenue, number of employees, date of last contact, company location, email address, deal size, industry, number of opens, days since the last contact, the deal status, and then your sales notes. The sales notes field is where all the good stuff is. And it's where everybody has a big data gap because, and I am 100% guilty of this, I don't log all my activities. I don't know.
We know. We are aware, Chris.
In fairness, all great sales orgs realize that you don't even let the reps do anything. Like, the goal is to have systems and virtual assistants and other things. You cannot trust the salesperson to take any records whatsoever. Never mind just, the basic call records.
Oh.
Exactly. But that's where automations like having your sales call system automatically putting the transcripts into your CRM records is a huge help, because that was a much better way to process that data. So this is what we have to work with. Now, some of these fields, you have to sit here and think, what should we use? What should we not use? What is useful information? Things like people's names, not useful, right? That is typically not a predictive factor for whether or not a lead is going to be any good. Same with someone's gender. That's just not going to be a good predictive factor. So knowing that and doing some inventory matters. Someone's job title, yeah, that's more useful. Like if they're the intern, then you're probably not going to get a lot of use out of that. Maybe. The company name may or may not be predictive depending on how good your marketing data is. And some CRM systems have augmentation where they will bring in, characteristics about that company. Annual revenue, that's useful, right? If the company's annual revenue is like $5, then unless you're selling chewing gum, they can't afford you. The number of employees, also good proxy for that. The date of last contact, yeah, super important. Going back to what John was saying about behavioral stuff, if we have not been in contact with this lead in months, it's going to be a harder boulder to push uphill than someone who was, dropping by yesterday. Company location, useful, especially for sales organizations to have territories. If you're outside territory, you need to know that. Email address, not helpful. The domain name might be, but the email address is not helpful. Deal size, that's where your people would presumably put in what they estimate the deal to be worth. This is a highly variable field that is a behavioral and governance problem, because there's somebody who's like, every deal's $1 million, and there's the other side, which is on the other side, I put $1 for every deal. Like, this deal's only worth $1, and then Katie's like, why is our pipeline worth $25?
Uh-huh.
That's called sandbagging. Yes, that's a well-established sales tactic.
But I also think, some of the things that John mentioned are, to me, that I would care about in terms of the score is, have we worked with them before? Is this, have we even engaged with them before in terms of, do we have a close lost? Those kinds of things to me would definitely make a difference in terms of the score.
Exactly. You have things like number of opens of emails, useful.
Mm-hmm.
How many days since they last opened an email? What's the deal status? If they're a prospect, or they a suspect, are they an opportunity? Because your sales CRM is going to dump all the stuff out. And then, of course, the notes field. Now, this is a toy example. Your actual CRM, like if you're using Salesforce or HubSpot, this spreadsheet is going to be hundreds of columns long. What's the last page they were on, UTM tracking codes, page history, all that stuff is going to be in there. Again, because we don't want to show live data, that's not in here. But we're going to build with this toy example with the understanding that you will then go and apply this to real production systems. So let's go start making some AI, right?
No.
The first place to start is thinking through how do you know whether this is any good or not, whether this data is not any good or not. And the place to do that is with your ideal customer profile. Mm-hmm. If you have your ideal customer profile, you can then say, how closely does who's in our database resemble the people that we know we can sell to?
I would also argue that we skipped a very, very important step, and that is at least a basic user story for what we're doing. You could do user stories for every, level of the lead score, but for an overall project like this, so, as the, head of business development, I want to prioritize the high quality leads so that I can close those and improve my close rate, or bring in revenue, or, get the CEO off my back, or whatever the thing is. But making sure that you, at the very least, start with a high level user story, so that as you're working through refining the lead score, you're like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. Because Chris, to your point, there's a lot of data here, and some of it's not really going to be useful. So if it's, I want to know who specifically is in my database, then you do want first name, last name, versus I want to figure out which leads are most likely to close. You don't need first name, last name. So I think that I just wanted to sort of remind people not to skip the requirements gathering.
Exactly. Don't skip the requirements gathering. And the worst possible thing you could do is just dump this whole spreadsheet into a generative AI tool and say, hey, score my leads. That would be a unmitigated disaster. What you would want to do, though, is think through, how would I ask these questions? Right. So with things like user stories, with things like the 5P framework, thinking through, how are we going to do this? Who are obviously the P of the people is here, right? There's these literally the people. What's the process for lead scoring? Katie, you have something on your mind?
No, my understanding, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that basically you have to have your set of criteria. And so, all the things we've been talking about on this episode so far. So, number of opens, number of, things downloaded, location, company size, those are all assigned a range of numbers from 0 to 10 or whatever it is. And, each individual data point within it. So like if your company is like 50 to 100 people, you're going to score maybe a 1 or a 2 versus your company is 5,000 plus people, you're going to score a 10. And so you need to define that criteria first, and then you can start scoring things. I would assume that that's going to be a big, huge part of the process is defining the criteria and assigning numeric values.
Yeah, you've got the big thing. This is just another chicken and egg kind of problem, right? Because you will create a lead scoring system, then live with it for a little while, and what you're going to find is like, okay, these indicators here actually don't matter. These do. We've missed them, and so they get iterative. And so you can take that all the way back to the user story. Usually the user story is, as chief revenue officer, I want to create a more effective lead handling process. Like that's all it is. And then as time goes on, it becomes, oh, as CRO, I want to know how much the email is a factor in getting to close deals, and have the lead scoring system reflect that. And so, yeah, there's a number of different ways you can do that. Like you just hit the company size one. Like that's a great one. That's always the first one, because you just want, if Fortune 50 company shows up, that needs to get a score that immediately goes right to one of your best people so they can just figure out what's going on. And if it's one person who's, proven that they will waste your customer service reps, 2 hours on the phone and never buy anything, you make, and even this is another thing, people kind of think of it as a positive thing, but it can be negative reputation too. You can give somebody negative 20 points if they're, on this side of things. And then all your marketing and sales programs can say, oh, by the way, anybody below 0, they don't get anything, they get blocked at the door. They get a separate website that shows Sesame Street. You can do all kinds of stuff to keep them away from what you've got going on.
I would add into the scoring criteria then anyone who says certain phrases on a phone call will get negative points. And we can discuss what those phrases are offline, or you can find me in analytics for marketers and I'll let you know what they are.
You're killing me. Yeah, because I have the same thing. There was somebody we were on a call with a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, this person said that. I will never do business with this person ever. I don't care who the hell they are. No, you don't talk like that. It's 2025 for God's sake. But
I think the point there is that a lead score is personal to a company. You should not be accepting a generic out of the box lead score, because what we at Trust Insights value as this is a good customer versus a bad customer is going to be very different from, the company down the street. And so if we're trying to use the same lead scoring system, we're going to get very different results, and our sales team is going to be very unhappy.
Yeah, and so there's a dividing line there too of ABM, account-based management, right? There's this whole thing of like you've got the right thing of everybody's different. Even within a company, there's people that you don't want to deal with, and there's people that you definitely want to answer the phone on the first ring every time. So there's that whole spectrum. But then there's the account-based management level of like, okay, these certain companies we know we'll never do business with, so they can. And so now you get into, okay, well, does the account have the own score, or do you add up all the individual scores for the account? But yeah, no, everything you said there is on the mark, as far as there are people you want to do business with and people you don't.
Poor Chris just wants to get to the AI, and John and I are ranting about sales processes.
Oh no, this is totally fine. This for folks who are watching, this is every day at the office.
Well, I mean, it's either John and I ranting about sales or Chris ranting about AI. So it's really just a matter of what day you find us on.
Exactly. It's every day at the office. So our next step is to figure out how do we prompt this thing? How do we make this work? Because there's 3 levels of generative AI, right? There is done by you, done with you, and done for you. When we talk about automation, we're talking at the levels of done with you or even done for you, but you can't get to those upper levels without doing the done by you. And the done by you starts by seeing if this is even a task that your AI systems can handle. So the first part would be, you need an ideal customer profile. You need to say like, hey, here's who we think is useful. And if you don't have one, call John Wall. He will he will help you set up a service to get that rolling. So I'm going to go I'm going to use Google's Gemini, but you can use the system of your choice. Does not matter. We're going to want to start with an ideal customer profile, and then we're going to want to start with some of this data. So let me go and just get from Google Drive my ideal customer profile, Trust Insights ICP. And there it is. Let's bring this in. And we're going to start with a prompt that goes something like this. I want you to compare this target company, and we're going to take just the first row, the first 2 rows of data from our spreadsheet. And we're going to put it in here. Whoa. That is not at all what we want to do. Thanks, Excel. You came in as an image instead of text. So here's our target company information. Now, I'm using Google's Gemini 2.5 Pro at the moment. One thing you have to think very, very hard about is what model are we going to use for this at scale? The smarter a model is, the more it's going to cost you. Google's Gemini, if you look in the pricing here, you can see the pricing is $2.50 at its maximum for input, $15 for its output, $10 normally for its output. That doesn't sound like a lot, but just for this one analysis here, it's already at 3,700 tokens, and it continues to go. And so, yeah, so it is now at 5,000 tokens. So you can imagine if your CRM has hundreds of records or thousands of records, and you're using the smartest model available, you are going to get a bill. You're going to get a large, very, very large bill. And it may not necessarily be the best fit, because this analysis is great for a person. This analysis is not good for a CRM, because you don't want to put like a book into every single CRM record. You want a number, the lead score. So we can at least say, okay, does this work at all? And the answer is yes. We can at least get a set of numbers out of it. The next step is to say, well, if we can get a set of numbers out of it, then what would happen if we said, well, I just want you to give me some of the numbers? And I would go in here and say, here's the output. I want this in a format that a computer can interact with, because generative AI is like the engine. When we're talking about things like lead scoring, you kind of need the rest of the car. You need a way to talk to your CRM to get data from it. You need a way to clean up the data and get it ready for generative AI. You need to process it with generative AI. Then you need to clean the processed material and then hand it back to your CRM. No tool on the market today, no generative AI foundation tool can do those steps. None. You have to put it in something else, which means that if we think back to the 5 Ps, part of platform is, how are we going to get data in and out of our AI system? Because having a human being copy and paste is, you're not saving any time.
No. And again, that's why you don't want to skip over the requirements, because as fun and exciting as it sounds to have this, AI studio, suddenly give you a bunch of scores. Okay, then what? What do you do with it? Also, can we go back to the cost piece? Like, what is this output going to cost us? Is it going to cost me $10?
If you get to 1 million tokens, yeah, it's going to cost you $10. So the pricing is based on how many tokens that you're generating, putting in and taking out of the system.
But I guess my question is, we're not going to be using 1 million tokens today, right? We don't.
No, because we're not using the API. We're in AI Studio. AI Studio is sort of the development ground now. However, we will be putting this into a production API, and we're going to talk about how that would work and what kind of costs would be involved.
Again, don't skip your requirements gathering, because these are all things you want to know before you start doing stuff.
So this looks better. So now we have the thinking block where the model's allowed to think out loud, which you have to do. If you say, just give me the number, you are going to get terrible results, because language models need to talk. The more they talk, the better the results get. The flip side of that is, the more they talk, the more it costs you, because every single piece of information that comes out costs you money. So this one came up with a lead score of 80. Okay, good. That is in a format now. This is a format called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, that machines can read. Next, here's the challenge with our ICP. Our ICP is 2,600 tokens. If we're going to put this in production, can we shrink that down? And we've talked about this on past episodes of the live stream about what sparse priming representations are. Sparse priming representations basically take all the features of a big ICP and shrink them down to just the highlights. So an example of that would be the section I have highlighted in blue here, which is everything that is in that long ICP document condensed down for the Gemini model to use, that contains all the key points, but kind of like a Cliff's Notes version of it. This now is going to save you a lot of time. So let me take away that file and edit this in. And so now let's delete our previous results. Instead of 3,000 tokens going in, what if it looks like this? There's our ICP. Now we are only at 633 tokens. So we have shaved off merely like 90% of the prompt's length without losing a lot of accuracy. Now, if we rerun this with the exact same test information here, it's going to generate results, and it should come up with a lead score that's probabilistically in the same range. Not exactly, but it's going to be close enough.
If just a general question about these systems. So you had already spent, I don't know, 3,000 tokens on that first run, and then you deleted it. Does it then take back and reimburse you those tokens?
No.
If you say, just kidding, I didn't mean to run that.
Nope. Once you're in production in the API, which is not this, but once you're in production, every time it generates a token, that is a sunk cost.
But I was talking about this.
Oh, this is AI Studio is free.
Okay.
But it's obviously a lot of copy paste. You can't run software within AI Studio. But this is meant for developers, like what we're doing right now, software developers, to try things and do exactly that. So they're like, oh, this didn't work.
But again, I feel like, and I'm going to keep harping on it, going back to the 5 Ps, that's where platform is going to be really critical to figure out, which platforms can we test this in? Can we do proof of concept in? Versus going straight to the thing that is maybe the best, but costs the most money if you're still in this testing phase.
Exactly. And this is why things like the SDLC matter and why process matters. Done by you. We're going to test this part. This is the engine. We're building the engine right now. You don't just want to wing it and then put a bad engine into production, because you're going to waste millions of tokens, thousands of dollars. And here's the part that's really bad that you don't see with a lot of the LinkedIn, AI bros. You won't know it's bad. You won't know that what this, the AI bro and their super secret system put together, it's just handing back lead scores. You have no idea whether it's actually right or not, unless you do these phases first to test it out.
I feel like if I'm getting a big AI bill and no new closed deals, that tells me it's bad.
That tells you it's bad, but by that point, your AI consultant has moved on to the next sucker. And
for sure.
And you're just stuck. So here, with that compressed ICP down to the very small thing, it still comes back to the lead score of 75. It was 80 last time, so it's within the ballpark. We might want to do some more tuning of if this was in production for for real, we might do some more tuning on the ICP, see if maybe making it a little bit longer would increase its accuracy. But we're in the ballpark. Like, it didn't come back with a 5 and say like, oh, this is completely unqualified. Now, at this point, we've got kind of a working engine. We've got a prompt, and it generates a result that is in a useful format for machines. We now have to figure out, how do we automate this? Because this is still not doing anything that you can't do by hand with ChatGPT, for example, and it's a waste of your time.
Yeah, because there's things that we had talked about, from the CRM data that aren't necessarily reflected in our ICP. So like number of emails opened, or are they a previous customer? How does that factor into the scoring?
So that goes into the prompt itself to say, How do I want to think about those factors? I might give it an example even. I might say, like, here is an example of how I want you to report on this. And I might say, alignment. Alignment is I want you to figure out how closely the sales notes mirror what's in the ICP, or number of emails or things like that. So you would put this either in the example section or in the upper section to say, this is how I want you to do your thinking. So again, this is engine building. You have to sit here and tell the tool, this is how I want you to think this process through, which goes back to requirements gathering.
It's funny how it always goes back to that.
Exactly. So in the interest of time, we've got a working prompt. We now need to figure out how we're going to put this thing into action. You could use a cloud-based service like Google's Gemini, and there are a number of different models. You could use OpenAI's models like GPT 4.1 or O3. You could use really any company's models that are safe to use with proprietary data, including personally identifying information, because you are handing over the crown jewels of your company to a company, to an AI company. And so please don't use like any free services, because you're not paying, you are the product. The thing to keep in mind is that all AI models essentially are in families. So you can do stuff in Gemini, and the Gemma models, which are derived from Gemini, will inherit a lot of that, the way Gemini does things. You can use OpenAI's O3 and then use a lightweight version like O4 Mini to do the API level processing. You can use, if a company makes a big foundation model and makes an open model like Mistral or Gemini, or I wouldn't use DeepSeek, the hosted services, but if you have DeepSeek hosted on your hardware, you could, whatever the case is, you want to stay within that family. So you don't want to do this process in ChatGPT and then use, say, the Quinn family from Alibaba, because they're it's like getting a book out of one library and returning it to a different library outside of that library system. They're like, this doesn't even match our Dewey Decimal numbers, so we don't know where to put this. Stay within the family. So because we're in Gemini, we could, and we will, use the Gemma family of models. Why? Because they can run on your hardware, which means, Katie, you don't get a big bill.
Oh, thank goodness.
Free money.
You don't get a big bill, but you have to have the processing capacity to do this. For a lot of organizations, particularly once you start getting into, mid-market and enterprise, they're like, you know what? We've already got a big enterprise account with Google Cloud. What's another $100,000 on that account? And they won't care. But for a company like Trust Insights, we're like, you know what? We don't have $100,000 to throw at this.
No, we don't.
We don't have $10,000 to throw at this.
No, we don't. How do we then get this from, okay, I have a lead score of 75 into our CRM so that someone like John can be like, okay, great. This person, they're above the threshold. Let me go chase them down.
Yep. So first things first, your CRM would need to have a new lead score field. And in it, you might call it like AI lead score. That part's important. Second thing is, your CRM had better have an API that other software can get information from your CRM, and other software can push data to your CRM. So, for example, if you were to go in, just Googling, you could say, show me the HubSpot API. And HubSpot has an API. Salesforce has an API. Pretty much everybody does.
I was going to ask, in this, the year of 2025, are there large software systems that don't have APIs?
All hospital software. You don't want anybody accessing that from outside, from the internet. Yeah,
hospital systems, sure. But I mean like CRM systems. Like, I guess I should clarify. In this, the year of 2025, are there marketing and sales centric software systems that don't have APIs?
There are. They're not the big ones, but there definitely are some of the smaller players. And also there's a lot of companies that have homegrown CRMs. And those, it's highly dependent on whether the developer thought to build an API or not.
Fair.
So because we know these systems have this, we can go to our old friend N8N and we can say, hey, do you have a connector for your CRM? Oh, look, HubSpot does have a connector. Terrific. And I could see all the different options that are available, like for just starting out. If a new contact enters the database, that would be a great time to start the cleaning process so that you're not doing batches and waiting for a bunch of processing. For today, though, I'm just going to use a manual trigger. Now, as I mentioned, we absolutely positively cannot use live data on this because you don't want to give away your stuff. So I have mocked together, as I mentioned, that pile of fake information. And this part of the process is going to be completely fake. Desktop, live stream, and I think, what did I call that file? Synthetic CRM. Let's test that. I have my CRM data. And now I need to turn that CRM data into something that an AI tool could understand. So for me, for us today, this is a CSV file. If you're using HubSpot, you might not need this step, or Salesforce or ActiveCampaign, because it's already going to be in JSON format. So we can test this, make sure, 5,000 records in this CRM. Now, we know from looking earlier when we were looking at the Excel spreadsheet, these are not all prospects. Some of them are closed won, some of them are closed lost. We really care about the prospects. So we probably should do some filtering and say, let's add a filter. And we want our deal status to equal prospect so that we're only getting our prospects. And we have 880 prospects in our CRM. So far, so good. Now, the next thing is for testing. The worst thing you could do is to try and do this on all 880 records, especially if you're using a cloud API, which is going to cost you every time you run it. So for development, put in a limiter, like just use 2 records, because otherwise you could be here for ages and ages. And so we could run a quick test here and make sure that, it came out with 2 items. You just take a look real quick and go, okay, yes, this looks like our data. So this part here, a lot of this would be replaced by your actual CRM in production. Our next step in the process is it's time to put in the engine. So let's put in a basic AI engine. We're going to define this. And for this part, we're going to take the exact prompt that we were using earlier that we tested out, and we're going to paste it in here. And let's go ahead and just tie this on the end. And this is where you have to decide what AI model do you want to use. And this is, again, goes back to all your requirements. I'm going to be using the Olama, which is my local version of Gemini that I have running on my computer because I don't want to send Katie a bill.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And let's take a look at our expression here. There you can see the fields from our CRM data are in here. There's our prompt example. This looks good. Now let's go ahead and run a quick test, and we should see if we did this right. Our local AI, there it is, churning away, thinking about the answers and processing that data. Once we've got that part, let's see, we're going to need to get the data out of it because the data
I was going to ask, I'm like, okay, but then how do you get it?
Exactly. So now we need to do a set. And the set is going to we're going to take the results from our AI, and we need to turn it back into something usable. So let's test this step. And now it cleans up this JSON, which is great. We want that. From there, we need to just get the lead score. So remember, we have 2 parts to this prompt. There's a thinking part where the model gets to foam at the mouth, and then there's the actual number. You may or may not want to have the foaming at the mouth part. You might want to keep it maybe as for an audit trail, but you might not. So let's take our set field here. We're going to call this lead score because that's what it is. And we have to extract out the lead score from that great big huge JSON array. Now let's see if we did that right.
Now, as you're putting that together, my thinking here is that as much as I probably don't want to read through what you call the foaming at the mouth, it is probably a good thing to have, to your point, for an audit trail, because how else will you know if it goes wrong, where it went wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So you may not need to look at it until something goes wrong, but then you'll be glad you have it.
Exactly. And certainly I think for the initial R&D part, you absolutely have to have this, the diagnostics. So let's see if we got, yep, there's the lead score. It came up with a 68 for our test record, which is great. And now,
right, John, you're not chasing that one, John.
68, yeah.
Now we have to convert that JSON data. In this case, I'm going to convert it to a CSV. In reality, this is where you would hook it back up to your HubSpot system and say, update my system. So this is the process of CSPen, desktop, live stream, output, scored leads.csv. So again, this is now, let's tidy this up a little bit. This is essentially the flow to implement and get started with generative AI lead scoring. After this, once you've done your testing and you beat it up and you look for variations and you look for all the weird stuff that can be in your CRM, you would change the upfront node to be your CRM to say when a new contact comes in, and maybe you might have some gating on that. When a new contact comes in from certain forms on your website, run through this whole process and then pop the score back on. This has to stay operating. So if you have N8N, this has to stay in operation. The server that this is running on has to be on 24/7 so that the data gets processed. Or the highest level of automation is agentic, right? Turn this to an agent where what I would do again if this was in production, N8N allows you to grab your configuration from its interface. And so you can see in here, it produces a nice JSON file that has the prompts, has all the settings and stuff inside of it. JSON is computer language. It's a computer language. So I can go to a generative AI tool and say, convert this into Python code and make me a bespoke custom app that I can put into production and host that on the server of my choice somewhere. And then it runs all the time without me, and I'm no longer part of it. So that's the highest evolution. Once you've done the prompting, you've done the testing, you've done the data cleansing, you've built a workflow, you've tested the workflow, you've built the automation, you've tested the automation, you build the software, you deploy the software, and now your bespoke lead scoring lives somewhere on the cloud. And it rains dollars on your sales.
Right. Just a bucket of money, right?
Yep. What to think about, though, is that this is a very basic process, right? And you can obviously include all things like the page views and stuff like that. But what you could do in this flow is add things to it. You might have a second part of the LLM chain that says, here's who this company is. Here's the products and services that we know they're interested in based on the pages they visited. Write the suggested email for the sales rep to reach out, right? If you have a standard sales playbook that we talk about often, maybe there's something from the playbook that automatically gets put in and that gets put back in your CRM software. And so now, instead of John having to go, I got 480 leads to follow up on with today. Now John can go in and say, send, and just do that. You could fully automate that. I would not recommend it.
What do you think, John? Are you feeling excited and motivated, or are you feeling replaced?
Oh, no, you're never replaced, right? Because the goal is, in most organizations, like once they light it up, the problem is always too many, leads, right? Like some people call them leads, other people call them contacts, other people call them bums. It's a matter of how they are. But yeah, anything that helps you sort and just get through the grunt work faster, that's going to help you get to the points where you're actually talking with people and really making deals happen, trying to close business. And so, yeah, no, automate it all. That's my mantra.
Awesome. All right, Chris. Well, I hope you know that we will be setting aside time to do this for Trust Insights, because there's definitely some cleaning of our CRM that we could be doing and better lead scoring than we have. So, if you are inspired by this episode, great, give it a shot. If you have questions, you can certainly reach out to us in our free Slack community at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Or if you're just like, you know what, I don't even want to deal with it, you do it. Let's go to trustinsights.ai/contact, and you will get the one and only John Wall, who will help you set up the lead scoring with generative AI. And he will say, here's what you do. We're going to set you up with Chris.
We got stuff for Chris to do. I feel like we should have a George Wendt Cheers tribute as a Boston-based company. I think so. We have to give a big Norm.
There. That's
the
true.
part I will end with is you really, really have to get your requirements gathering right. If you get that wrong, as these systems get more complex, it just gets to be more and more work to rework them. If you nail the requirements and you really spend some time and say, if I could have AI do X and Y and Z within my HubSpot, because or my Salesforce or my Active Campaign, I would like it if it could do that. And that way you can start having the machines help you plan and generate all this stuff. Because obviously from what you saw today, from a very toy example, it's not rocket surgery to put it all together. But the higher up that ladder you go, the more things can go wrong and the harder it is to make changes afterwards if you didn't get your requirements gathering done right up front first. If you're going to spend and invest money in a process like this, put 50, 60, 70% of your time and money in the requirements gathering. It pays dividends like crazy, because the software part is, AI handles that, but the AI cannot guess what really works at your company. Spend some time building your ideal customer profile. Get that right, because it is the hinge on which this whole thing pivots on. If the ICP is wrong, your lead scoring is wrong.
And I would add to that, definitely think through what it's building off of your ICP, but what things about your ICP do you want to score? How do you want to score them? How heavily do you want to weight them? Not everything is going to carry the same weight. So really think through, because you can make a really sophisticated, automated lead score if you think those things through. So I might say, you know what? I don't care about company size. I care about, team size. And John could counter with a different argument, and we need to be on the same page in order for this to work, because you don't want to have, well, here's the Katie version of a lead score, and here's a John version of a lead score. That, I feel like, opens it up to a lot of potential conflict and no sales being made.
Exactly. And a lot of people stealing each other's lunch in the break room on Friday. That's going to do it for this week's show, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you on the next one. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.